Good morning. It's Friday, January 23rd. The multi-front war in the Middle East is now 839 days old. I'm your host, Jonathan Schanzer. Welcome back yet again to the FDD Morning Brief. Well, the Board of Peace is officially launched. I got up at the crack of dawn yesterday to watch, and I must say I was pleased to see a lot of world leaders line up to try to bring about a new future for the Gaza Strip. I was also glad to see the president of Indonesia on that stage. As you've all heard me say on this program before, I'm bullish on Israel-Indonesia normalization. I'd bet my vinyl record collection that a deal is on the way. But we need to see some calm first in Gaza. It's hard to make peace with a nation still at war. Oh, and one more thing about the Board of Peace. I sure hope Donald Trump stays focused on the mess in Gaza before trying to wield that board to solve other conflicts. Gaza is a Gordian knot, Mr. President. You're going to need all the help you can get. Just stay focused. Buckle up today for a road trip from the Middle East to the Far East, because today's guest is Craig Singleton. He is Senior Director of FDD's China program. Craig is a former U.S. diplomat with deep experience on issues relating to China, North Korea, the Indo-Pacific. He writes frequently in major outlets, and he's quoted in them as well. And he writes about CCP's influence campaigns, Taiwan's security challenges, and a lot more. Today, we're going to be talking about China's response to the capture of Maduro, a key ally of Xi Jinping, how Trump's Iran and Venezuela strategies are impacting the country's strategic calculus, the gap between China's projected power and the reality on the ground. Oh, and a little thing called TikTok. So anyway, stick around. My conversation with Craig is coming your way in about as much time as it takes a state-backed Chinese hacker to steal your password. Critics keep talking about how Donald Trump missed his big moment with Iran last week when he reportedly deployed a bunch of warplanes with heavy ordnance to Iran only to call them back. Critics note that the protest movement is petering out. The Iranian youth have gone home. They're wondering what happened to the help that was supposed to be on the way. Meanwhile, the death toll continues to climb. Some estimates now put the carnage at 20,000, mostly youth, and the numbers of injured and arrested Iranians are mind-blowing. Their only crime was protesting their oppressors, and their oppressors are downright brutal. Want to know what I think? I think Trump balked, but he didn't step away from the fight. Since last week's turnabout, he's deployed a massive armada to the Middle East. He says he can still unleash on the Islamic Republic, but he's also quick to say that he would rather not. I can't tell you the president's calculus here. Few can, but I can tell you what I'm watching. I'm watching the state of alert in Israel. I'm watching the readiness of other actors in the region. And I'm downright fixated on those ballistic missiles that the regime has pointed at Israel. The clerical regime could very well try to saturate the skies over Israel if America attacks. Try being the operative word, of course, because Iran is at a distinct disadvantage here. The U.S. and Israel are tracking their every move, and they've got their fingers on the trigger. The regime knows it, and the pressure is building. Now for your headlines. Headline 1, Israel banned 29 Turkish individuals from entering their country. The most recognizable of them is Bilal Erdogan. Yes, the progeny of Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. According to the Israeli government, Bilal has been engaging in activities that have earned him this blacklisting, like calling for systematic boycotts against Israel, glorifying violence, and justifying attacks on civilians. In other words, in the Erdogan family, the poison apple doesn't fall far from the tree. In addition to Erdo's mini-me, the blacklisted Turks include religious figures, journalists, academics, content creators, and public officials. I would also note that the head of the organization that spearheaded the 2010 Mavi Marmara Gaza flotilla incident, the IHH, is also on that list. That just makes me wonder why it took so long. Whatever the reason, Israeli Diaspora Affairs Minister Amichai Shikli summed it up best when he said, and I quote, "Turkey is an enemy state," end quote. That's actually not something to take lightly here, folks. The Israelis know they don't need another enemy, but it appears that they can no longer escape the truth. Shikli just said the quiet part out loud. Headline 2, Iran is reportedly turning to cryptocurrency to resuscitate its flatlining economy. According to blockchain analytics company Elliptic, the Central Bank of Iran bought more than $500 million in dollar-backed digital assets over the last year to bypass U.S. sanctions and to weather the forthcoming collapse of the rial. Based on what I've seen lately, I'm not sure it helped. The economy in Iran is still in the commode. Here's what went down. Until June 2025, Tehran routed the digital dollars to an Iranian cryptocurrency exchange. There, people could hold the assets in dollars, trade for other crypto, or sell for Iranian rials, which would be a bad investment. But then a pro-Israel cyber group hacked into the exchange, and Iran had to switch things up. I'll spare you the tech speak and offer you the upshot. Elliptic says that Iran is developing a sanctions-proof way to hold on to those U.S. dollars. But to that I say, perhaps, because just remember, it's not hack-proof. Headline 3, the Treasury Department slapped sanctions on a network of nonprofits tied to Hamas. 6 Gaza-based charities were hit. All of them claim to provide medical care to Palestinians, but actually support Hamas terrorism. According to Treasury, Hamas staffs and funds these sham charities, and some of them even funnel cash right back to Hamas. That's shocking. Not really. Additionally, Treasury took action against an organization called the Popular Conference for Palestinians Abroad, PCPA, as it's also known. The PCA helped organize some of those recent flotillas that tried to break Israel's so-called blockade on Gaza. And get ready for the shocker. The PCPA is actually a Hamas front. No me digas. For those who took French instead of Spanish in high school, that's Espanol for a very sarcastic, you don't say. Treasury said that Hamas helped subsidize the PCPA's inaugural meeting to the tune of $100,000. FDD, I'm proud to say, has been tracking PCPA for several years. To the good folks at Treasury, I say thank you and keep it coming. Bonus headline 4, Israel is still schwacking Hezbollah in Lebanon. Earlier this week, Israel eliminated Hezbollah liaison officer Abu Ali Salameh. According to the IDF, Salameh managed Hezbollah activity in a southern Lebanese village where he helped embed terrorist infrastructure among the population. Shocker there, human shields and all that. After the strikes, there were additional attacks along the border with Syria. The hits keep on coming. Just a reminder, Hezbollah may be down, but it's not out. All right, it's time for that conversation with FDD's Craig Singleton, his first time on the show. Let's do this, shall we? Welcome to the program, Craig Singleton.
Thanks. Long-time listener, first-time caller, right?
All right. Well, I'm a big fan, been following your work for years. I actually have no choice in the matter, but still, it's fun. You're doing great work. And I think probably one of the things that I've seen you have the most impact on, and I want to start with this, is TikTok, that toxic Chinese-owned social media vehicle that should never have been operating in this country. And right now, it looks like it's about to go through a change in management. So what happened and why is it important?
Yeah, no, thanks, John. I'm really proud of our work at FDD. It's a team effort against TikTok, but it's pretty clear that China won this round. The statute requires a very clean Chinese divestiture from the app, not a workaround. But that's exactly what's been announced yesterday, late last night. ByteDance is the Chinese company that owns TikTok. And it looks like they're going to retain the algorithm. They're going to get to continue to determine what Americans see and, more importantly, what they don't. And this is just a flagrant violation of what Congress passed, but also the Supreme Court unanimously upheld. We did a lot of the legwork here, helping to map out the links between ByteDance, that Chinese parent company, and the Chinese Communist Party, and also to show how the platform promotes anti-Semitic content, Chinese propaganda, harmful content to our children. I suspect, though, this is not the end of the story. A future administration could force a divestiture of the app or a review, and TikTok investors can lose billions.
Yeah, and I've got to hope that that's what happens. I've got to imagine that there's some risk with some of the companies that have acquired TikTok or the stakes that they have.
Yeah.
And Congress, obviously, you know, if they want to uphold the law or a next administration, as you suggest, we could be watching some changes. So I guess let's stay tuned for that. I want to pivot to the Middle East now because, well, that's what I watch. What is China doing while the winds of war are clearly blowing in the Middle East? I mean, Iran is a Chinese ally. Are there signs that Beijing is ready to send help? It didn't happen last time around, did it?
Yeah, China is not a great friend when their friends are in need. So far, it's been barely a peep out of Beijing. And it was barely a peep out of Beijing when the U.S. ousted Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela, another strategic partner of China. Ultimately, it's unclear how a potential attack on Iran could impact, I think, China's equities in the region. They do import about 10% of their crude oil from Iran, and they do it at depressed rates, a below market rate so that they can save money. The reality, though, is that China leans a lot on other suppliers in the Gulf, Russia, and they've been building up a strategic stockpile for this very moment. So right now, it looks like China's sort of relegated to the superpower sidelines, and we're going to wait and see if they actually sort of get in the game here.
It's so interesting to me too, because, I mean, they're doing this massive buildup, right? I mean, they're flexing as world powers. And yet, every time we see the United States get in there, they drop the midnight hammer on Iran in June of last year. They take out Maduro. I mean, we're flexing again right now in the Middle East. The Chinese just seem to they don't want to take the risk.
Yeah.
At what point do you think we prompt them to step over that line? We dare them and then they actually take the bait.
Yeah, there's a real gap between China calling itself a great power, this rhetoric that they promote, and then its actual global reach. The reality is China is not a superpower today. The US can still operate across theaters. We can synchronize these complex operations. We can impose outcomes without seeking permission from anyone. And that's really sobering to the Chinese. They hope that as their military gains strength and gets stronger, that these sort of circumstances change. But today, in this very moment, they're really limited. I think ultimately, unless we start to make strong, serious moves against the Chinese, they're going to stay on the sidelines. And at this moment, it doesn't appear likely that this administration is going to pressure the Chinese on any front, primarily because the administration wants to keep this tactical trade truce with Beijing before President Trump heads to China in April.
Yeah, and so all eyes on that. Okay, but in the meantime, I do want you to broaden this out for a minute. We talk a lot at FDD about, we call it the axis of aggressors. And our colleague Brad Bowman's in the middle of writing a book about this. Will be coming out hopefully in the next couple of months. We talk about basically China, Russia, Iran as the three kind of key partners in all of this. But let's take Russia out for a minute. What does the relationship look like, broadly speaking, between China and Iran? We talk about how it's kind of a symbiotic relationship. They're both helping one another. It's an important alliance, apparently not important enough for China to intervene when Iran's being threatened. But what are the ways that we see them working together to undermine American interests?
Yeah, when I hear the word alliance, I think of like our construct of alliances, right? Like we take on burdens for our partners. It's very clear that what the Chinese and the Iranians have isn't an alliance. It's just an alignment. It's a mutual loathing of the United States. And so they can each get something from the other. Obviously, in this case, China is able to get oil below market rates. They're able to have access to the region and telecommunications infrastructure in Iran. One of the things the Chinese did was they sold all the CCTV cameras that have been used in Iran to spy on all of the protesters. It's a topic we've reported on for years at FDD, helped get them on U.S. export control list, a company called Tiandi. So they think about it as a very sort of outpost, like planting a flag in the Middle East. For the Iranians, it's a lifeline, though. They require those oil purchases from the Chinese to sustain their economy. And so it's a very unbalanced relationship. And the reality is that just like the relationship between China and Russia, the one with China and Iran is one in which Iran is a vassal increasingly of China. And how this plays out over time remains to be seen.
I want to ask you specifically about one thing. It's the thing that I'm probably tracking the most out of Iran right now. And that's the missiles, right? There was this stockpile that the Iranians had developed, I guess, largely on their own. It was indigenous, but maybe some Russian help. I think the stock of Russian weapons manufacturers have gone down enormously since the June strikes of last year. Obviously, the S-300s didn't do jack all to prevent the Israelis from dominating the skies over Iran, over actually 3 different installments, but the biggest one being the 12-day war. What we're hearing right now is that the Chinese are supplying parts or maybe entire systems, and that this has actually helped the Iranians expand that missile arsenal. It was 2,500 last year, and the Israelis destroyed the vast majority of them. Now we're hearing there's like 4,000, 6,000, 7,000, I mean, depending on who you're talking to, ballistic missiles back in that stockpile. What do we know about those missiles, and are they reliable? Are they accurate? I mean, what should we be thinking about as we look at this Chinese tech, these platforms that are in Iran right now?
Yeah, one of the things we've been tracking is the flow of these Chinese military planes from China to Iran ever since Trump announced last week that he wasn't going to strike and they reopened Iranian airspace. No one seems to know what's on these military planes that are coming into Iran. I think that's a big question mark. I'm sure it's one the U.S. intelligence community is running to ground. The reality, though, is the Chinese tech can be useful, but it's certainly nowhere near as advanced as the counter capabilities that Israel and the United States have. There are reports that the Chinese had supplied Venezuela with radar technology and other sort of defensive technology. And I think we all saw that it didn't work so great when U.S. commandos went in to seize Maduro from his bed, no less. That doesn't mean we should discount it. China has a vast missile arsenal. They are increasingly willing to sell that technology to the highest bidder. And in this case, if it's about its regime survival, I suspect the Iranians will move heaven and earth to refill those stockpiles and try to maintain some sort of deterrent capability against the United States and Israel.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I've heard, that some of that in Venezuela anyway was about operator error as opposed to, the platform itself. But who knows? I mean, I don't have that.
There are some great reports online that perhaps there was like a human source inside of the Venezuelan military that defected that may have turned off the radars that day. I just don't think we know, but it doesn't exactly engender confidence about China's technical capabilities if it's that easy to turn them off.
Right. And I think we're going to hold on to that. We try to hold on to good news where we can find it. All right. I want to pivot to Venezuela because you actually served in Venezuela during the Hugo Chavez era at a time when Chinese influence was there on the upswing. I'm sure there are a lot of good stories about your time there. I don't know if you have any that you want to share here, but I do want to ask you, Maduro's ouster, is this as big of a setback for China as I think it is?
It's interesting. It's the same cast of characters as when I served there over a decade ago. In dictatorships, right, you play musical chairs with all the corrupt officials because you're all bought into the idea. So it's fascinating to watch that same grouping of Maduro followers and former Chavistas still in power. I think on paper, it's not exactly a massive hit to the Chinese. Remember, they only imported about 4 to 6% of their oil from Venezuela, and we talked about they've built out these strategic reserves. They've diversified suppliers. It's not such a big hit. I think the bigger question is what happens to all of China's sunk investments in Venezuela. So when I was there, they got into the telecommunications infrastructure, port deals, other negotiated deals, and it's not clear what's going to happen to those investments. President Trump is very intent on maintaining his tactical trade truce with China. So if he makes a hard move on some of these things, it could rupture that truce, and that carries significant consequences. So again, I think it remains to be seen how far Washington's willing to push there. And the oil loss alone is probably not enough to really shift China's regional calculus. Remember, they have significant investments in places like Panama. They have their eyes on Greenland. Cuba is a major outpost where they have spying installations on the United States. So this one loss isn't sort of a massive setback, but it could be the beginning of a big push against the Chinese and particularly the Russians in the hemisphere. TBD.
Yeah, and I mean, we can say that the regime in Venezuela, Maduro, was kind of a money launderer, a facilitator for all kinds of illicit finance. I mean, I think we can say that kind of broadly speaking. He was an ally, right? Anti-American ally. He was kind of part of that broader axis that China, purports to lead. So I guess there's that loss, but I take your point. We're going to keep watching that in terms of how meaningful it is. If oil was the primary, right, it's a small hit. All right, I want to broaden out a little bit more because I want to talk about the kind of tariffs. You've already mentioned that, and the trade war, and how it's sort of on pause, or at least it's being kept to a dull roar. We got the Greenland flexes from the administration, right? Really, flexing a good bit over the last week or so. You got the Board of Peace that was just announced, and China's notably not on it. Is China the intended target for all of this maneuvering at the end of the day? I mean, I would argue that that is the big picture here. We got the United States trying to show the world that we're still the kind of the lone superpower or the most relevant one. And we're making all these moves right now to demonstrate that we're the strongest actor, not just on the block, but worldwide. Is this how you'd frame it too?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, remember, there was so much talk when Trump entered office that he was an isolationist. It seems pretty clear that he is not. He is an aggressive internationalist, almost like a radical realist. This is the law of the jungle. And right now, China doesn't exactly have the capability to challenge us everywhere. A lot of folks have said that this is like a sphere of influence campaign, and we care about the Western Hemisphere, and we're willing to let go of other parts of the world. But it's very clear that it's just not true. The president is willing to exercise U.S. power globally, not equally, but globally when he wants, when he thinks the wins can be fast and transactional and cost-free, and they're not going to result in a forever war. I think when we look at our hemisphere, the president's thinking pretty clearly that right now we have the means and capability and reach to change the map, to change the board, if you will, in ways that can have long-term significant consequences on the Chinese and their expansionist global ambitions. The question right now is we have to recognize that the Chinese have tools too, and they played card on us last year to cut off potential rare earths against the United States. And that's led to what is really like a tactical truce today. It's temporary. It's not structural. And I think we just have to remember that while the administration is very keen to keep channels open with the Chinese to avoid a lot of new irritants, both sides are working aggressively right now in this contest between the two countries, and competition's going to resume. It's not a matter of if, it's when.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, and there's this argument that America does better when we have a strategic rival, right? Like, we watched America thrive during the Cold War with the Soviet Union, and it's this kind of competition that actually brings out the best in our country. And I could actually see the rationale here. But I mean, this is not just about looking for a reason to get stronger. We're not looking to just rally around the flag, right? We talk about China as a real threat, right? So, I mean, I think if I can just ask you, maybe draw this out for us. Explain why this is like inevitable, this kind of clash between our two nations. We call it great power competition. It could be great power collision at some point. So what are the concerns?
No, absolutely. China wants a world that reflects its values and its interests, a China-centric order. This is diametrically opposed to our worldview. Open markets, in theory, freedom, democracy, they are just incompatible, just like they were with the Cold War in many respects. And so it does seem as though we are in something of a collision course. Both sides are going to figure out each other's pain points and their pain tolerance and figure out when they need to press on issues that are important to them. Both sides are pretty confident, though, right now, and that's what really leads to miscalculation. Right now, the Chinese believe that they more or less won the trade war, that if anything, it was a draw. They were one of the few countries that stood up to the United States. But I think we have a very emboldened U.S. president who also feels as though we can flex power around the world. It remains to be seen where this is going to go, but I wouldn't bet against the United States in our dynamic model. And increasingly, the signs and signals that we see out of the Chinese and the Chinese government are extreme unemployment, a deflationary spiral, all of these massive challenges, and they don't seem to have a plan to get out of there. So again, I think that ultimately too will be a big debate. Is China a rising power? Are they peaking, or are they actually on decline? And if they are declining because of U.S. pressure, that makes them even more dangerous.
Right. I mean, I will say when we talk about this sort of, the diametrically opposed worldviews, tech plays such an important role, right? The wielding of AI, the wielding of private data, the intellectual property that, I mean, we all know about how much the Chinese have stolen. They're trying to weaponize it, and they weaponize it against their own people, but they also want to weaponize it against the West. I would just say for folks listening and watching, nobody has chronicled that effort more than Craig. All the different companies that are being wielded in malign ways. Craig has been single-handedly and systematically calling them out. So I want to recommend highly that everybody follows his work. And I got to tell you, his file is going to heat up. It's already heating up, but it's going to heat up more. You're going to be seeing a lot more of them. We're going to leave it there. I want to thank you, Craig Singleton, for your first appearance and definitely not the last here on the FDD Morning Brief.
Yeah, thanks, John.
All right. Keep an eye on that file, folks. Here's what FDD has on tap for you today. My colleague Ahmed Sharawi has a sharp piece in Real Clear World on the Washington-endorsed deal between Syria's al-Shara government and the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces. Damascus says it wants to offer full rights to the Kurds, but the timing reveals a different strategy, which is to drain grassroots support for the SDF, to weaken it, and then apply military pressure to force favorable terms. The result, SDF fighters now have to join the Syrian army as individuals, not units, and this is gutting the Kurds' ability to defend themselves. Despite the U.S. enthusiasm about this framework, notably from Tom Barrack, the ambassador to Turkey, don't hold your breath for a kumbaya moment, folks. I'm concerned about what's brewing in Syria, especially with those Kurds. Your humble FDD Morning Brief host has a piece in the New York Post. You can check that out. It was posted up there yesterday. It's on Trump's Board of Peace, which is designed to implement that 20-point plan for Gaza. You've already probably noted by now that the board's charter makes no mention of Gaza. Even more eyebrow-raising, Trump invited Putin and his Belarusian counterpart to join. Not exactly boding well for peace when you think about it that way. I got to hope right now that Trump keeps the focus and the pressure on disarming Hamas. I fear we could be straying from the mission here. Broader mission creep, no bueno. Finally, FDD hosted an event yesterday at our headquarters on how China and Russia are plundering American technology and weaponizing AI to turbocharge their espionage operations. David Shedd, author and former acting director of the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, joined FDD's Ivana Stradner to discuss where Beijing and Moscow collaborate and how China learns from Russia's playbook. Oh, and that discussion was moderated by Craig Singleton, FDD's the guest today on the FDD Morning Brief. So, yeah, it all comes full circle. Check out the recording at fdd.org/invest. And with that, we conclude another grab you by the lapels episode of the FDD Morning Brief and another jam-packed week that's also coming to a close. If you want to spend your weekend filling up your brain with smart stuff, then I encourage you to visit our website, follow our social media accounts for the fascinating content there. And yeah, don't forget to make that very generous tax-deductible donation at fdd.org/invest. You'll get a nice note saying how much we appreciate you. Tune in Monday for another well-planned but not too scripted episode of your favorite morning show. Until then, have a great weekend. Stay warm. I'm Jonathan Schanzer signing off for FDD.